When the receipt printed with a bold, humiliating $0 tip, Emily Carter felt her stomach drop so hard she thought she might faint right there beside table 12. The man who had just walked out of the restaurant had arrived in a black luxury car worth more than she would earn in 10 years. Everyone knew his face. Everyone whispered his name. Billionaire investor and tech magnate Daniel Whitmore had just finished a $600 dinner, and left nothing. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one moment can change a life forever, take a second right now to like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this matter because they remind us what humanity really looks like. Emily stood there staring at the receipt as the dinner rush roared around her. Plates clattered, glasses chimed, laughter spilled from nearby tables, and the smell of garlic butter and grilled steak hung thick in the air. But all she could hear was the echo of her own thoughts. $0. After she had stayed late to take his table. After she had memorized his specific dietary preferences, the hostess whispered to her. After she had endured his silence, his cold nods, and the way he never once looked at her name tag. She folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket, as if hiding it would make it hurt less. Emily Carter was 28 years old and raising her 6-year-old son, Noah Carter, alone. His father had disappeared before Noah's second birthday, leaving behind unpaid bills and a voicemail apology that she still couldn't bring herself to delete. Emily worked double shifts at Whitestone Grill, a high-end restaurant in downtown Chicago, while juggling school drop-offs, late-night homework, and hospital visits for Noah's asthma treatments. Every tip mattered. Every single dollar was already spoken for before it even reached her hands. Her rent was 2 weeks overdue. Her car had been making a grinding sound that terrified her. And Noah's inhaler refill wasn't covered fully by insurance this month. She had taken Daniel Whitmore's table because everyone assumed a billionaire meant a generous tip. Even a modest percentage of that bill would have covered her electricity and groceries. She had smiled through exhaustion, refilled his sparkling water before he asked, recommended the wine pairing the chef himself would approve of, and handled a last-minute kitchen error without letting him see the chaos behind the doors. And still, $0. Back in the break room, another server, Lauren Mitchell, squeezed her shoulder and whispered that sometimes wealthy people were the worst tippers. Emily forced a smile, but the humiliation burned. It wasn't just about the money. It was about feeling invisible. Disposable. When the shift finally ended close to midnight, Emily walked back to table 12 to clear the last of the dishes. The restaurant had quieted. The lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow, and the city skyline shimmered through the tall windows. She lifted the heavy ceramic dinner plate, ready to stack it with the others. That was when she noticed it. There was something tucked underneath the plate. Not money. Not at first glance. It looked like a folded piece of thick cream-colored paper. Her heart raced. For a second she thought it might be a complaint. A scathing note. Maybe something cruel. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a handwritten message in deep blue ink. You treated me like a human being tonight, not like a headline. That is rare. Please call this number tomorrow at 9 a.m., DW. Her first instinct was suspicion. A prank? A test? Some twisted billionaire game? She turned the paper over. A private number was written clearly beneath his signature. There was no cash. No check. No visible generosity. Just that. She slipped the note into her pocket beside the $0 receipt and went home with a mind full of questions. That night, as she sat on the edge of Noah's bed watching his small chest rise and fall, she thought about dignity. About how many times she had swallowed her pride for survival. About how many people saw servers as background noise. She remembered how Daniel Whitmore had observed everything quietly, how his eyes seemed to study the room more than the menu. At exactly 9 a.m., after dropping Noah off at school, she stood outside the restaurant with her phone in trembling hands and dialed the number. A woman answered immediately, professional and composed. She introduced herself as Margaret Ellis, executive assistant to Mr. Whitmore, and informed Emily that Mr. Whitmore would like to meet with her at Whitmore Capital headquarters at noon. No further explanation was given. Emily nearly hung up. She had no business in glass towers with marble floors and security desks. She owned one blazer, bought secondhand for job interviews that never led anywhere. But something in her refused to let fear win. At noon, she stood in the lobby of Whitmore Capital, dwarfed by steel and glass. Daniel Whitmore was waiting for her himself. He looked different in daylight. Less intimidating. Still sharp. Still unreadable. But human. He explained that he had built his empire from nothing. That before the headlines and the billions, he had worked service jobs to survive. That most people treated him as invisible then, too. He told her he often left no tip intentionally, not to punish, but to observe. To see how staff reacted when they believed they were not being rewarded. He said she had not rolled her eyes, not whispered insults, not altered her professionalism even once. She had dignity. And then he told her why he had asked her there. Whitmore Capital was launching a new foundation focused on supporting single parents pursuing education and career advancement. They needed someone to lead community outreach, someone who understood struggle firsthand. He offered her a paid training program, a full-time position with benefits, and childcare support through the foundation's network. Emily could barely breathe. This wasn't charity. It wasn't a handout slipped under a plate. It was an opportunity. He also handed her an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check large enough to clear her immediate debts and secure Noah's medical needs for the year. He said it wasn't a tip. It was an investment in someone who had already proven her character. The weeks that followed felt surreal. Emily transitioned from late-night shifts to morning strategy meetings. She learned how to speak confidently in rooms where she once would have felt invisible. She helped design programs for mothers who reminded her of herself, exhausted, overlooked, but fiercely determined. Noah's health stabilized. The grinding noise in her car disappeared after repairs she could finally afford. The rent was paid early for the first time in her adult life. Months later, at the foundation's official launch event, Emily stood at a podium overlooking a crowd of donors, volunteers, and families whose lives were already being changed. Daniel Whitmore sat in the front row, not as a billionaire icon, but as a man who remembered what it meant to be unseen. She spoke about that night. About the $0 tip. About how quickly we judge, and how easily we miss what's really happening beneath the surface. She spoke about dignity as the most powerful currency of all. And in that moment, she realized something profound. If he had left a standard 20% tip, she would have smiled gratefully, paid a few bills, and returned the next day to another shift. But because he left zero, because he left only a note, he had forced a different path to unfold. Right before we end, please comment the word hope if this story reminds you that blessings sometimes arrive disguised as disappointment. If this story touched your heart, if it made you rethink a moment in your own life when something that felt like rejection turned out to be redirection, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and leave a comment. Your engagement keeps stories like Emily Carter's alive and spreading. Because sometimes the plate looks empty. Until you lift it.